Hey, Matt.
Hey, Ty.
Here's the deal.
Oh, boy.
So our last podcast was a pretty serious topic, right?
Absolutely.
Like Vietnam, right?
Yep.
And I think we did a good job because our goal was not to discuss the reasons for the Vietnam War. We just want to know what was going on in a 17-year-old's head during the Vietnam War, right?
Who volunteered?
Who volunteered, yeah.
Okay, yes.
It's a great episode. I hope everybody listens to
Yes.
it. I think the thing we need, because we're not professionals, we're getting better every episode, but we need to be aware that, like, not everybody knows everybody we're talking to. So a lot of people, especially in the international community who listen to us, are probably
Right.
like, what's a Neville?
That's a fair question.
And
I
other
blame
people
us.
are like, clearly, like, one was protesting the war, one was fighting the war. Why did you not follow up on that? And we're like, because that wasn't our intention. We want to know what was going in Russ's head at 17 years old.
That's exactly
Maybe
right.
someday later we invite them on and discuss that, but that wasn't what we were prepared for.
The views, opinions, and statements expressed by the hosts of House Calls, the podcast, are their own and do not necessarily reflect the perspectives, policies, or positions of the show, its producers, or any affiliated organizations. All commentary is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only.
Right. And also, let's be honest, Neville would get on there and talk her liberal bullshit. No one wanted to hear it.
The second thing is, Russ mentioned a guy named Buddy Lanier, I think is what it was, who he said walked on his hands from Robin Hood Beach to the Sherwood Forest Clubhouse. So also our international community, we need to set the tone for that. So that is about a mile. And part of that mile, there's a huge hill that is somewhere between an easy slope on a ski slope to an intermediate slope on a ski slope on his hands. So that raises a couple questions. First of all, if Buddy Lanier was on our side, why didn't we win the Vietnam War? That's question number one.
Fair.
Question number two, did he play in the NFL for 20 years? Was he a professional wrestler? Like, what did he do with that crazy upper body strength and agility?
And his hand strength. Don't forget, he started at Robin Hood. That's rocks.
Yes, yeah. So, and I feel like maybe you and I were just caught off guard that we didn't have any follow-up questions on that. But that
no. In the pre-interview, when we talked to his team, we said we were just going to stick to Vietnam. Russ went off course, and we were not prepared. I think that's fair.
And that happens when I watch interviews sometimes. My latest thing, because we did the Oscars edition, and I ask this all the time, I'm like, do you wonder, if Matt Damon, when he's doing Born Identity kind of movies, CIA officer, does he ever wonder, do I have what it takes to be a special agent? Did Brad Pitt after Formula One wonder, hey, could I have been a race car driver? George Clooney, when he did ER, did he ever wonder, hey, could I be a pediatrician? Do they ever wonder that when you're an actor, do you think?
Absolutely. I've actually talked to Anthony Hopkins about this, and he's pretty sure he could be a serial killer.
Okay, that's horrible.
No, I asked him. I point blank asked him one time. He said, hello, Matthew, and it's freaked me out.
I think we all look up, think being an actor would be great, and I'm like, I don't know if that would weigh on me to be after playing pretend all the time, whatever, wonder, could I do the real thing? When the actors who play us in House Calls, the podcast, the movie, when they wonder, what must have been like, could I have ever pulled off a podcast?
Yeah, no, I really can't wait for those guys those guys to really see what they can do. It's not easy, right?
No.
I mean, it's not like we just roll out of bed and, do our hair and we're here. I mean, there's a lot of prep that goes into this.
So the other thing is, in that podcast with Russ, you were wearing blue, and I think blue is your color.
Wow, thank you,
look
Tiger.
great. Yeah.
Thank you, pal.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
For two middle-aged guys, I thought we looked good in that episode.
Wow. Well, that's great because our guest tonight, Ermis, you both have the same burden of being best friends with some of the best-looking guys on the East Coast.
Yes, yeah.
And so his is the Persian Panther, and you got stuck with me. But you have a lot in common, and Ermis has another great story that I'm very excited about.
Can I say one thing about Ermis?
Say anything. Yeah.
Well, two things. First thing is, I'm excited for this one because we both know Ermis, but from different tracks.
That's right. Yep.
So I think that's interesting. The second thing is we know that we've talked in some of the origin stories of me about my academic record was really good in spots and not great in other spots. And
Right.
some of my not great spots were pronunciation. So I thought it was funny that you were afraid to pronounce his last name.
Totally. 100%.
You are a coward.
100%. Here's Ermis.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to an all new edition of House Calls the Podcast. Tonight, Ty and I are talking to a friend of ours that we, as Ty said earlier, we both know independently of each other, which is a first for us because I really didn't know either one of us knew anybody that the other one didn't know. I thought all of our friends were mutual and relatives were mutual. So this is, it was nice to have you all to myself for a little bit, Ermis. I know Ty had you first, but we had a nice thing going, and now it's all been ruined.
So, Ermis, what we want to introduce you, and I accuse Matt of being a coward of trying to pronounce your last name. So,
I can't wait to hear this.
Yeah,
so Matt, go. Ermis, what's your last name? Matt,
it's Sfakiyanudis.
how close did he come?
I got pretty close. Yeah.
You know,
How would
it's
you say it?
passable.
How would you say it?
Sfakiyanudis.
Sfakiyanudis. I said nidus, nudis.
So when I was traveling Greece, that's how everybody else spoke it. So that's why I knew how to say it.
There you go.
Okay.
Have you want to
When
try
they
it
all
now?
talked about me over there.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Wait. So you're Greek? Again,
Yeah.
learning stuff
Shocker.
learning stuff right out of the gates. Ernest, where do
I
we
know.
find you tonight? Are you with Mr. Jordan right now, or are you at his club right
just
now?
in my home office tonight. This is a Jordan Wizards jersey I've had for a while, and yeah, that's the one thing I have hanging up in here.
That's great. That's great.
Mhm.
What a nice little piece of memorabilia, because I think he did just enough to make the Wizards good enough to miss a lottery pick, and then they wasted it on Kwame Brown, who went
I
to
remember.
yeah, that was not good. But I saw him play a lot of golf in town when he was here. It was weird. Saw him a couple times, but he is on next week. So tune in for Michael Jordan to talk about Ermis. But right now, so Ermis, you and I know each other from the business world. You and Ty know each other from the parenting world of lacrosse players.
That's right.
But before all of that, your story really begins with your parents, like most of us, and your parents are from, I'm guessing, Greece.
Well, yeah, they are. They took a winding path actually to
Okay.
get here. So my parents were Greek, born in Istanbul, Turkey. Grew up there, and then in the 60s, when there were challenges between the Turkish government and the Greek population of Istanbul, my grandfather, who was still a Greek citizen, was kicked out of the country. But my father, who was born there, was a Turkish citizen uh, of Greek descent, and he was allowed to stay, finish college. He went to an American university in Istanbul called Robert College, which was a division of New York University. But when he graduated, he was drafted into the Turkish army, which
Whoa.
potentially meant he would have had to fight against Greece if there was a
Yeah.
skirmish. So he and my mother were married, and they did a midnight express, paid the border guard, and left the country
Oh my,
and went into Greece. And my father has a civil engineering degree like I do, and he couldn't find work in Greece, so a family friend got him a job in Canada, of all places. So they moved to Canada, stayed there for a few years. I was born there. And then my dad's sister married a Greek American guy from Baltimore, from
Hmm.
Highlandtown. She moved to Baltimore, and my dad complained about being cold in Saskatchewan, which is just above North Dakota.
yeah.
It's the Midwest of Canada. So we drove down and lived with my aunt and uncle in Baltimore and my cousins.
And how old were you when you came from Canada to Baltimore?
I was about 2 years old when we came.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
how did you make it to Annapolis, and what were your parents doing during that time?
So when my dad met a guy from Annapolis at the Greek church in Baltimore, and he happened to be the head of public works in Anne Arundel County. So he got my dad a job at the county as a civil engineer for Anne Arundel County. And we moved to Spa Cove Apartments, and we lived there. My dad ended up becoming chief of roads for Anne Arundel County, Department of Public Works. And then that was like early 70s, 71. And then 1975, he left the county and started his own engineering consulting firm called Sigma Associates.
Huh. So
Yeah.
so wow, that's so interesting. So why I can't remember, I'm not even trying to pronounce where you were in Canada. So why there? That's where he found a job. And then in
That's where he
Highland,
found it.
right? And then in Highland Park, there was a at the time and still is heavy, high Greek population. So how important was the Greek community to your family? Obviously, because they're everywhere they
Yeah.
went, it was all connections through their heritage.
Well, yes. And, so one of the cool things about the Greeks in the United States is they assimilated, they became very much a part of the culture here, but they also kept a lot of the Greek culture over
Yep.
time. And so the churches kind of became not only the center for religious beliefs, but also for a community. And so they were very heavily involved in Baltimore, and then when they came here, our church used to be down off of, by Maryland Hall, off of, Constitution Avenue there, and then they built this big church on River Road. My dad was very involved, both of my parents were very involved in that, and so, that's been a grounding force in their lives and a real sense of community.
So by the time I met you, it's like you're a regular Annapolis guy. Like you went to
Yeah.
Annapolis High, you went to University of Maryland, you're running a business. What was that like young where you had kind of two worlds of your immigrant parent Greek world and your regular old Annapolis guy world? How did those combine and like what memories do you have of anything about that?
Well, it's very much like, the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, if you've ever seen that.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't allowed to spend the night at any American kid's house. I only could spend the night at Greek kids' houses
Wow.
growing up. I used to actually spend a lot of time in Epping and Sherwood because I grew up in Rolling Knolls. So,
Uh-huh.
um, I used to go over there, but I was very naive growing up because I spoke Greek first. English
Hmm.
was a second language growing up. And then, I just didn't have a lot of those cultural touchstones that kids that grew up around here with parents that have been here for generations understood. So a lot of nuanced jokes were lost on me as a kid and but I also had really great friends and I picked up pretty quickly.
So with your extracurriculars, obviously going to church, is it a Greek Orthodox church? Or is it
Yes.
okay, so that was a big part of the life. On the outside, like, what were your hobbies? Like, were you getting into sports? Were you getting into any arts or anything like that? And were they any what like, geared towards one way? Like, parents like, "You're gonna play soccer because these other weird Maryland sports we're not getting near." Like, how was that?
No, Ty, that's exactly it. Like I said, I grew up in Rolling Knolls, so we had the Generals Highway League. I think was it I forget what they called it, but there was a football team, so I went and I put on the helmet and the pads they gave me, and the guy said, "You blocked that guy there." And I said, "But coach, when do I get the ball?" He says, "You never get the ball." And I'm like, "This sport sucks. I don't wanna play this." And and my dad said, "I don't understand lacrosse and I don't understand football. I'll coach you in soccer."
Uh-huh.
So, from a very young age, I played soccer. I tried playing basketball because the Greek churches play each other in basketball. So we had something called, the acronym was Goya, Greek Orthodox Youth of America, and we used to play basketball against other churches. And some churches, like the Baltimore churches, they had kids from Calvert Hall that could dunk, and and then us poor Annapolis, we were not the best.
Right.
We were not the best. We
And
had fun,
That's
but
that's all that matters.
and was there anything academically during your Annapolis High years that kind of led you to anything that led to you to what you're doing now?
you know, it's many a winding road, right? This is
Yeah.
how I got here. So I was always a math and science kid. Um, I had finished most of my math credits by the time I was a sophomore in high school. So, I was taking advanced math and science, and I got to give Annapolis High School credit. If you are an advanced student, they have plenty of classes for you to take, and so I enjoyed that. I got into Maryland Engineering School and got a civil engineering degree from there. And I did civil engineering for almost 12 years, land development side of things. But it was a volunteer position. So when Janet Owens was county executive, she appointed me and Conrad Wason and Gil Hardesty to the Board of Economic Development. They were having challenges with the board. It was being written up in the Baltimore Sun, and there were some things going on that she said, I don't ever want to see economic development in the paper again. I want you guys to go in there and clean this up. So we did. And we did the no cost economic development transfer of David Taylor Research Center across from the Naval Academy, where the county took it, bought it, and then sold it to a developer. But economic development ran that process. And then when that was done, she said, what should we do next? So we hired a firm out of California to do a research project on what assets we had in the region that we could leverage for economic development purposes. And what they discovered was we had NSA in our backyard, and we had all this technology, and University of Maryland was one of the top research schools in the country. So we set up a technology accelerator / incubator called the Chesapeake Innovation Center. And I was the founding chairman of the board, and we had the first of its kind public-private partnership with NSA to do technology transfer outside the gates of the fort, and for them to be able to bring commercial technology into NSA that would help with anything Homeland Security related. So this was pre-2001.
Yeah, this is way
Well,
in
how
front
old
of
are you
anybody
during this
doing
period
this.
of time?
I was, let's see, so that would have been 98. I was 30.
So I just first thing, how did you get in that position at 30? Was it your special degree? Was it like you had job and you moved up? Like how'd you become the head where you're doing all this stuff?
It just was economic development. Janet asked me to join economic development because of my background in land development and understanding of the code and how to do that sort of thing and be part of that process for the selection of who should develop that project. That's how I got on economic development, and then I became chairman of the board, and then I was the guy in the seat when we launched the Chesapeake Innovation Center. So no special talents. I just am a bit of a sponge. I did a lot of listening.
But you're also a great networker. You're personable, and people want to be around you. You're obviously very intelligent, but people want to be around you and learn more from you. Sure, be in the right spot at the right time, but your intelligence and your personality definitely helped a lot in that. Um, Unfortunately, Ty and I don't have those skills. That's the reason we have to keep talking to each other.
Well, of
Um,
course you do. That's why I'm here.
that's
Well, and
true.
I don't want to slow you down too much, but Matt and I do talk a little bit. Like I understand fixing bones, I understand being a
Mhm.
fireman, I understand being a policeman, but like civil engineer is something I haven't thought about much. And honestly, like if we were on the sideline of our kids' lacrosse game and I was like, "Hey, Ermis, what do you do?" I would have been like, "Oh, he drives trains?" like like
Yeah.
so when you were young, did you understand what your dad did? And did your kids know, like when they were in high school, did they understand what you did, or how did you break it down for them?
I still am not 100% sure my kids understand any of what I do, but that's only because I change,
I was gonna say, 'cause
what
you
I
do
do
yeah,
frequently.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Uh,
Ty, you're the only one, again, that's had the same job for 30 years,
d
okay?
right.
Everybody else has what they call a full life and a resume, right?
Yeah.
Ty has one spot, but Ermis obviously has taken that and has an entrepreneurial spirit to him that has allowed him to go in so many other areas, and not just in the civil engineering, not just in politics, but all over the place. So you're a civil engineer, you're not driving trains, you're understanding about, maps and, boundaries and the codes of the county and the municipalities that you're dealing in. When do you leave the government side of it and when do you go to the private sector and why?
Well, so the civil engineering, I only did private sector work. I was a consultant that was hired by land developers who wanted to get their projects done. So, like for instance, I did a lot of work in Sherwood Forest looking at the grades of a lot of the backyards where there was a lot of erosion and how do you prevent the water from eroding the slopes.
How did that process work, and what were you telling them? How were you telling them to take care of the slopes?
So we did an entire stormwater management study back in kind of the mid 90s. There was some erosion coming from back behind the general store and off of some of the people's houses back there. And so we were trying to look at how to slow the water down so that it didn't concentrate in one area and create erosion down the slopes. But a lot of it was just the natural terrain of Sherwood Forest. You've got steep slopes, you've got trees with not particularly strong roots in some areas. And so there wasn't a lot to hold the dirt back
Yeah.
if the
The
water got overly concentrated.
we had an issue a couple years ago where I guess there was a disagreement about trimming the trees on those steep slopes. So the thought was if you trim the trees, then too much water hits the slope. That was kind of the county's position. So don't trim the trees. The other position is they don't have deep roots. So if you don't trim the trees, they get top heavy and the wind blows them over. And when I was young in the 70s, there was a couple erosion areas which were like beaches on the steep slope. So they were super fun as a kid. You basically had a
Mhm.
beach to play on a steep slope, but not really great for water runoff and erosion control. So it was basically a disagreement on the proper way to trim trees so the trees don't fall down. And it was a big deal with the county trying to come to a conclusion that is still somewhat ongoing. But it's interesting that 20 years before you were already on top of that, like, giving advice to the community.
Well, this is probably a longer discussion than you want to get into, but
No, no,
I
no. Tree
disagree
trimming
with.
is riveting, riveting stuff. God.
I disagree with the county's position on steep slopes and how they tackle it, frankly. I
Uh-huh.
think that if you focused as much effort and energy and dollars into shoring up the slopes by putting retaining structures in. There are all kinds of anchoring systems available out there that allow you to hold back the dirt, anchor in, use footers on the slope side, and take some of those trees down so that you have more plunge pools cascading down so that the water slows down. It doesn't take all the dirt down with it. But that's me. I don't believe in this whole, build your house 50 feet from the 2% slope, and it just is ridiculous, in my opinion.
What kinda happens next in your career as you're 30? Are you starting to get married at this point, or what's going on?
I got married in 99 and had my first child in the year 2000. And at the same time, I was doing the Chesapeake Innovation Center, we got Nokia, the handset maker, as a sponsor of the incubator. And so I got to be friendly with the folks at Nokia, and they asked me to join a board that they had called Nokia Innovent, which was this really bleeding edge technology review team that sourced deals for Nokia Ventures. So I got to tell you, there are very few times in my life where I've had imposter syndrome, but when you're sitting at a winery in California with the CEO of Nokia and a team that includes professors from Harvard and from Wharton Business School. And, I'm a civil engineer from Anne Arundel County. I'm like, what am I doing here? Who invited this guy? Um, but I caught the technology bug, and that's how I ended up getting into tech.
We like giving younger people a message. So looking back at that experience, was that something where quickly you realized that you understood the tech and you felt comfortable in that situation and their degree, where they were from, didn't matter once you're talking ideas?
Yes, because I had a different perspective than they did. So my biggest challenge was the language. Again, we talked about it when I was a young kid. Language and context became something very important. It was the same thing in this scenario. They were talking at a level up here that was very theoretical about business concepts and things that, you know, w- University of Maryland is great as a civil engineering school, but they don't produce civil engineers with finance backgrounds or business understanding. Those are learned skills. So, if I was talking to what I did right at that age was I surrounded myself with people that were way smarter than me and I listened to them. And I was able to very quickly, within the first couple of meetings, start to understand the context of what they were saying, even if I didn't always understand every idea that they had. So, but it allowed me to then participate in a different way and to give a different perspective that maybe was not as academic, but more practical.
And did you have any mentors that stand out during that time?
I did. There was a guy that actually lived in Davidsonville, local guy named Bob Root. And I met Bob through this whole economic development engagement stuff. And he was a fascinating guy. He still is a fascinating guy. He just doesn't live around here anymore. He used to be the CEO of Maxtor hard drives. Do you remember those from like when hard drives were, $500 for 1 megabyte of
Oh, yeah.
hard drive?
Yeah.
He was the CEO of that company in California, and he was very early days of Silicon Valley. And his wife, Wendy Steele, was the head of HR for Coca-Cola. So she had a very high executive
Oh, wow.
position.
Okay.
And they met at one of these ropes courses where, you go executive retreat type stuff. And they decided they wanted to leave the rat race and go be coaches for people, life coaches and help them with their careers. And so I met Bob and he really helped me in the early days around how do you start a venture backed technology company? How do you position yourself? What is your value proposition? What are the right questions to ask? And how should you prepare for the questions that you don't see coming? And he was really good at that.
And
That's
then how did
invaluable.
you, because you're starting to get people working for you and you're building a team, what was your concept of team building? Like, what characteristics were you looking for?
Well, my dad taught me a lot of stuff. We worked together for a lot of years after I got out of college. So, in a very Greek manner, I wasn't allowed to work for anybody else when I was in high school.
Uh,
All my buddies were working construction, and my dad said, "I don't want you breathing sawdust," and I'm like, "All right." So, I could design a stormwater management pond when I was still in high school. My
Were you just
first summer job.
were ladies just throwing themselves at you in high school? I mean, were you
Oh,
just putting
yeah,
up
yeah. Yeah,
numbers?
believe me, it's hot when you go to a bar and you tell them what you do,
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so no, not at all. I got lucky. I believe me, I outkicked my coverage here, but, um,
But the
yeah,
experience you got, you got this great knowledge, but you got to do it with your father. I mean,
yeah.
you can't trade that in for anything, and, that's fascinating, and I love that it's still more of the Greek culture that's still, that he brought with him that, that you get the benefit from.
And that's
I mean,
kind of an interesting concept because I mean, I do the same thing my dad did, and there is some kids who it works out great for doing the same thing their dad did. Other kids, maybe not, and it really has to do with probably the kid. Like, you don't wanna over your pressure your kid to be like, "Oh, you gotta do what I did."
Right.
And my dad never over pressured me, but he would kinda sometimes be like, especially once I was in medical school and it was choosing my specialty, he'd be like, "Well, sure, you can do that, but then you gotta hang out with a bunch of whatevers." I don't wanna criticize any medical specialty, but I'd come home and be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, dad, I thought this was kinda interesting." He's like, "If you wanna hang out with those kinda guys all day," and I'm like, "Oh, okay."
And my dad did the same thing to me, he'd
Yeah,
say, "Do whatever you want." And I'd say, "Well, man, I'm thinking about being a lawyer." He's like, "Oh, do you know how many hungry lawyers are out there?" I'm like,
yeah,
he didn't tell me how many hungry engineers were out there,
no.
yeah.
that was
Oh,
tough
that's
too.
so great. That is so perfect.
So then where does your journey go to next?
So, in 2004, I stayed involved in land development. I did some commercial real estate and those sorts of things, but in 2004, I left civil engineering and started a tech startup, and, uh, it was a learning experience, to say the least. These things don't always go as planned. And we were doing great. We had signed a deal with Nortel Networks. I don't know if you remember those
Yep.
guys, but in 2009, I think it was somewhere in like 92% of my revenue was coming from my partnership with Nortel. And I was going up to do a training session in New York with them. And I got to the hotel and I got a call from my contact there and he says, "Don't come in today. It's not a good day." I
Mm-mm.
was like, what is constitutes not a good day at Nortel?" And he said, "We declared bankruptcy this morning."
Yeah, that's not a good
And I
day.
was like, "You're Nortel Networks." And he said, "Don't worry. It's just a restructuring. We have $2.4 billion in cash in the bank. Nobody's worried about losing their jobs or anything." Fast forward to May of 2010, just kidding.
Yeah.
We're closing the enterprise division and Avaya is buying all of Nortel's assets. And so all of a sudden, all of my revenue, all of my opportunities essentially dried up overnight. And it was a big lesson on concentration of risk, how the big guys can push you around when, you rely on them for all of your revenue. And so that was a challenging time to say the least, but
So
it
you're
was a
you're
learning
married with
experience.
kids and are you starting over or what's going
Yeah,
on?
2010, I'm starting over.
Okay. And
Oh,
like
it was extraordinarily challenging,
uh-huh.
but yeah, so 2 kids but I had commercial real estate that was revenue producing for me. I mean, I wasn't starting from 0,
Okay.
but it was a blow to the ego for sure, and it was, challenging to figure out where to go next, and so I started doing some consulting for other tech companies. I did a turnaround in Savannah, Georgia. That was a music technology company. We were able to turn that around and sell it to a German company. And then um, I launched a cyber company that's still operating today in 2016, I got into AI very early with a company called Topos Labs. And then in 21, we sold that to an Australian publicly traded company called Nuix. And that's how I ended up still in the AI world.
So a lot of people, when they talk about their successes, they look at a setback like that and they look back and say, wow, that was the best thing that could have happened to me, or I learned so much from that experience. Is that the case with you, or were you just like, oh man, that sucked?
Well, I mean, it certainly sucked,
Uh,
but I've never met anyone that's done this sort of thing, gone out and taken the risks and tried to bring products to market that haven't at least failed at some point one time. And believe me, that's my biggest and most public, but I've had little mini failures
Sure.
along the way as well. And you learn from those things, and they are humbling. And sometimes when you're brash and young, you need to be humbled a little bit, not that you want to be and not that it's pleasant, but it certainly teaches you that it's your successes and your failures are not always your fault.
There,
So,
that's good.
you know, even when you succeed, it's generally sometimes someone picks you up, someone brings you along, someone gives you a shot that maybe they didn't have to give you. I tell the kids and I tell whoever will listen, be grateful for the team that's around you because no person does any of this stuff on their own, success or failure.
That's so true. That is so true. And as you're going through this, as as you said, your path and makes you this serial entrepreneur all of a sudden. How's your dad handling this? Your mom, right? Who are like, "What are you doing? Why are you taking all this risk? I've got civil engineering job here for you. Let's just lock it down and see how this goes."
Well, Matt, that's the thing. That's the irony, right? They worry about you. Even now, my parents are 84 and 79. They still worry about me all the time. But the irony is the risks that they took. They
Right.
left their country. They went to a place where my mother didn't speak the language at all. My dad did because he went to an American university, but my mom learned English from watching TV while my dad was at work, and just repeating it. And she ended up not only being able to speak, but write and run an accounting side of the business. So I think their education overseas helped them a lot, but they took a lot of risks,
Sure. Sure.
you
Totally.
so
know.
They
on
had
us,
to, right? They have to get here.
one thing we
Mhm.
talk about is sometimes people have like an over dramatic view of life sometimes where they think that in the early 20s or late teens that life is so hard. And although we're sensitive to that, we do like to say, imagine coming to the country because you had to escape, or imagine coming to a country where you don't speak the language. um, how do you now get that message to your kids? Like, you don't want to always be like, "Oh, I used to have to walk uphill in the snow both ways," but you do want to be like, "Man, look what your grandmother was doing. Well, look what your grandfather was doing." Like, how do you keep that relevant for a generation that's now 3 generations in America?
So it's a challenge, right? Once went and saw Howard Schultz of Starbucks speak live at an event at GW. And he was taking questions from the audience, and someone asked him, how do you instill the hunger that you had as a young Jewish kid growing up in Brooklyn to go after doing something like you did with Starbucks? And he said, my kids will never experience the hunger. They get picked up in a limousine to get driven to school. The most I can do is explain to them where we came from, teach them to be good people, and teach them how to give back to the community that they're in, and to be altruistic. So, that message stuck with me because my kids are never going to experience what it's like for someone to make fun of you for not understanding a joke because my dad, he would say, about somebody that was delaying something. He says, "That guy's always pulling his legs across the floor." And you'd have to think for a second and say, "Oh, he means dragging his
His
feet,"
feet.
right?
Yeah.
But it's a very literal translation. And so nuanced stuff like that I would get wrong all the time. My kids don't have that. They don't, so we expose them to as much of the cultural side of things as I can, and uh, tell them about the journey their grandparents took with me to get here, and the how hard it was. And we go by Spa Cove Apartments near Truxton Park, where we lived in our first place, and I learned how to crab off the dock down there, and just
And you
try to
guys
show them what it was like.
and you guys are obviously still very, connected to Greece. You go back there, you still have family there. And so,
Yes,
I think you're doing them a service by showing them, the before and the after. I think that's
right.
how lucky are they. Um, so what I want to get to though now is talk to me about your latest venture, Syneos.
Yep. So we started Syndeos after Topos Labs sold in 21. We got the band back together basically in 2023. So my CTO was our head of technology for Topos Labs, and my head of product was our product guy. And so we decided to leverage our background, our experience in AI, to tackle a problem that we saw in the marketplace, which was people have customer relationship management software like Salesforce and HubSpot, CRM, they call it. And it gets out of date very, very quickly because people change jobs. Not you, Ty, but other people change jobs. And their email changes, their title changes. So how do you, as that decays over time naturally, how do you keep that up to date? And so we built a platform that goes out and it identifies who that person is in your list, the correct name, and then it goes out and it finds that person, and it gathers as much information that's publicly available as it can to update your records. So it keeps your CRM
Yep.
data fresh all the time.
And current. That makes complete sense because, if you have the Salesforce using leads and things like that, that's gold. And with stale or bad
Yeah.
data, doesn't really work.
Well, it's the lifeblood of a lot of organizations that do any kind of selling. And then, today I just saw a stat recently that 85% of AI initiatives fail because of bad data, not because of bad attempts at implementing it. And it's because they're leveraging these contact names to automate certain outreach, and it's just not working because of bad data. So we're trying to solve that problem.
Yeah. No, I've looked at it and it's a very solid product, and I can see how it'll be another winner for you. And I also love this because Ty is just checked out.
I'm
He has
paying
no idea.
attention. I'm
I
taking mental
I
notes.
know you are. I know. Well, good. We'll talk to you after this. So Ty, there will be a
Yeah, should
quiz.
we switch back to lacrosse, Ty?
Yeah,
I
Is
please.
that
was I
helpful?
was thinking we
Ah,
could do
thank you.
that. Yeah.
So speaking of lacrosse, I know you didn't play lacrosse. However,
No.
you and not a coach, but you have taught people on the sidelines talents and tricks that they still use today. And I was
So the
talking
big question
specifically
is,
is I guess can I keep going on this
yeah,
my
sorry, I was
roundup?
interrupting. Yeah.
Okay. You haven't taught him how to not interrupt me, but you taught Ty House how to hug. The art
Yeah.
of the hug. And
I
I really think that's the greatest gift that you've given to society.
Yeah. Now, for the record, Ty,
Yes,
while I
please.
have you here,
Yes.
it was me, right? Not Franco that
It
taught you to
was
hug, right?
Ermis.
It
And
was a
can I
Irma's
give a
who?
little
All right.
background? Is I hug my wife, I hug my children, but I am not overall a hugger. And we're watching a lacrosse game, and I mentioned to Ermis that I was not a hugger, and he was like, "We'll fix that." So Ermis hugs everybody. And I'm like, is that an Ermis thing because you always have a smile on your face, you're always positive, or is that a Greek thing? Like, where does that come from?
I I want to say it's probably a Greek thing. I
Okay.
mean, I was fortunate enough to be raised in a household that had very positive outlooks on life,
Okay.
so that I can't take full credit for as a personality trait. It's a learned thing from being around that type of environment. But yeah, we hug everybody, and for the people that are listening that don't know me but know you, I'm about a foot shorter
Oh,
than
that's my
Ty.
favorite part.
So us hugging on the sideline was unusual and comical looking, I'm sure, but
Oh, I would have paid so
Well,
much
and then
money.
everybody
Well,
was
first
hugging
off,
me, and then
I would have paid
hugging
so
became
much money to see
yeah.
that because you have Ty the robot going, "Oh, this is awkward. This is awkward," and he's like, and Herman's like, "Come in here, get in here, you." Oh, yeah.
It's funny, Ermis, both my sons are phenomenal huggers, and I would consider myself probably the most improved hugger,
Oh,
at
yeah.
least in Annapolis, if not the whole nation, over the
Yeah,
last
no,
10
you
there
are
you go.
definitely you've come a long way. Definitely most improved.
Now, Matt,
Y
I do have a question about Ermis mentioned his height. So if the 3 of us were together, I would be the big goofy guy.
Yep.
You'd be the shorter side of medium, and Ermis would be a little bit shorter than you. And I have a theory about
We look like cell bars. Yeah.
yeah, I have a theory about little man's disease, okay? Because
Talk to
Ermis
me.
Yeah.
Ermis is the exact opposite of little man's disease. Like Ermis is always smiling, always happy, always confident. And I was like, I haven't ever seen you like mad or angry. I know it happens, but you don't show that. You do not show any little man's disease at all. And my theory is, were you full size like in the 7th grade? Because I have a theory that people who are full size in middle school
Huh,
never get little man's disease. So somebody who is short in middle school, they're more likely to get little man's disease because you might see somebody who's 6'1", but they were 4'5" in middle school and they have little man's disease. And you'll see somebody else
interesting.
who's a little bit over 5 foot. And so I wonder, were you full grown? Because you have no little man's disease.
That's a fascinating question, and it's very timely because the other day I was speaking at a conference and we took a picture, and I looked at the picture when I got home and I was like, Jesus, I'm the shortest guy in this picture. But mentally, when I was there, it never even dawned on me that so I don't know. I never, maybe I was, on the f regular height for whatever that was in middle school, and then I just stopped growing. So 5'5" is the best I got. I would run as hard as I could to touch the bottom of the net in basketball while guys were slapping the backboard, but, yeah,
And I'm with
it
you,
just
Emerson.
So
never dawned on me
I
that I'm
never think
short.
about it until I see a picture or Ty brings it up. That's the
well,
only
and
Yeah.
time.
I have been keeping track of this because I have several people I know that are extremely confident, no issues, don't care about height at all. And I always notice I'm like, because they were the biggest guy on the middle school basketball team. That's why they think of themselves as huge.
Hmm.
And like I
Yeah.
don't think of myself as 6'3", and I think it's because I was a tall kid. But then in middle school, I didn't grow, so I wasn't tall in middle school. So I don't think of myself. And sometimes I'll look at a picture and be like, "Oh my god, I'm a
Listen,
giant." What
Ty, can
happened
I
to that?
get you to just stop bragging for
Yeah, I
1
mean, we got
second
it.
over
We
there
got it. We
about your
understood.
height?
I mean, so
We
Eris, that
get it.
whole
You're
that whole
tall.
thing about you're confident, you're cool, you're always happy was to get back to he's 6'3".
I
So
was
welcome to
Yeah,
my world.
I
exactly.
was
Listen, that's
trying
what
to
it's all about.
compliment Ermis and say that I'm on the
Hmm.
dorky side of the height thing. And
Sure.
we already
Whatever.
established that that's
Uh-huh.
what makes the hug awkward, but I've gotten better at it. Because
Uh-huh.
Ermis was like,
Because you're
"Bend your
Isn't it
6'3".
bend your
nice?
knees."
Because the little guys are good huggers, but you tall guys aren't. I mean, go. You're a heightist.
Isn't it nice though to get a good hug and like connect with somebody?
It
I
is.
love that.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
It is. Now, Ermis, are you, now if you and I mean we've hugged, but now for Greek, are you giving me the kiss on the cheeks or is it just straight hug?
I stopped with the kiss on the cheek
Okay.
stateside. It's just
Stateside. Yep.
You know,
Yeah,
when I'm
you
in
gotta know your
Greece and
market.
I'm around my family, yeah,
It's all
we
good. All right.
double cheek kiss. Yeah.
Okay, I got it. I get it. But to watch Ty and his cousin Peter Smith try to hug, you know those trees? You know those trees you were talking about earlier? Oh, those trees are a lot more.
I'm
Peter's got
trying to
better.
think if Peter and I have ever hugged.
You have not. I've seen you guys score game-winning goals and shake hands.
So,
It's awful.
so Ermis, with your family coming from Greece, what would you say like are your favorite things about the Annapolis area? Like what would if you were telling somebody
Oh,
from Greece what it's like here, what would you say?
well, I mean, my family from Greece has been here and they love the water here.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's not nearly as blue and nice as there, but you know, we have the seafood, we have the coastline. There's so much nice stuff to do. And you know, the people are great here. It's just a great little town. So, you know, every time they've come, they've just enjoyed it, and they love DC too. So, you know, that's one of the things I think as a local we don't take advantage of enough is going into DC, seeing the museums and the monuments. But whenever I get family from Greece, we have an excuse to go out there.
That's great.
Yeah. I think that happens to all of us. Like you
Yeah,
Take for
sometimes
granted.
don't go even see like the things in Annapolis because you're so accustomed to it and you're like, wow.
right.
My mom used to be a tour guide in Baltimore, and like once or twice she had to she did the tour of Annapolis where she was the tour guide, and I was like, man, I wish I would have gone on that. Think how much I could have learned about Annapolis, which has a pretty interesting history. You and
Now,
I
were
know
you
that
a
at one
summer
point,
Sherwood?
huh?
Were you a summer Sherwood kid or were you here
Yes.
year
I was
round?
a summer Sherwood kid. But I was
Okay.
gonna comment that at one point, you and I know this, but Matt doesn't know it. Annapolis was the capital of the United States briefly.
Yeah.
So,
Hold on.
and
Oh, you got
when
You
that
could
one right.
fact check us.
You got that one right.
General's Highway is named General's Highway because General Washington walked down General's Highway to give up his commission in the military, which was astounding at that time. He was American Cincinnatus because he was the only person that basically gave up generalship of a conquered land, which is what he was.
You told me it was from the General Lee. And the Dukes of Hazzard is exactly see, Ermis wouldn't get that little joke, but because of his youth, but that's what you
Depends
told me
on the
for years.
day.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. Wow. So again, this whole podcast is all about Ty. Ty wants you to know he's 6'3" and he knows some interesting historical facts about
He's a
Annapolis.
history buff.
He's a history
Yeah.
buff, and he's a
And I've
doctor.
learned how
Have
to
you got it
hug
all?
because of
Have we got it
Irma.
all? Have we got it
Yeah.
all?
Yeah.
So Matt, what else?
Yeah.
What else do you have about Ermis? Because you're going to edit out the whole height thing.
No, I'm not. I'm
Okay.
just because I am not doing that. I don't have that much. Then we have nothing left of this whole show. No, what I have from Ermis is I just think he is fascinating, very smart, and personable. And hug or no hug, he's just a guy you want to be around and that's the reason he's been so successful. Smart, intelligent, and on it. He's just a good
Well,
person to talk to.
I appreciate that, Matt, but you know, I can't take credit for things like that. You know, my parents gave me amazing advice growing up at each stage of my life, and one of the main things that my dad told me very early on was, if you want to be in business, get out into government. And he didn't mean run for office. He meant participate. Go out, meet the politicians, join boards, volunteer for things. And so I did that. You know, I went out and I volunteered. And that those things, you know, if you were talking about advice you give to young people, those things are what led to the networking effect of, you know, I got asked to join a bank board when I was 32 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. I was all of a sudden on a publicly traded bank board. And, um, you know, I did that for 13 years and I met tons of great business people because of that. And then that led to growing my network and growing my circle. And if I have one skill that I think ties all that, glues all that together, it's that I still reach out to people just to say hi and check to see how they're doing. Um, I think that's super underrated these days where
So true.
we're all kind of in our own world and we're on the phones. And this is not meant to be a lecture or anything, but just reaching out to somebody to say hi and I was thinking about you. When I get those, it changes my whole day. It changes the whole dynamic,
Yeah.
No,
And so
you're so true.
I try to do that all the time as much as I can.
With the getting involved in government, and like you said it, you weren't running for office, but you're trying to do business with government. Would you have a message to kids now, kind of like when we were growing up and we were that age, you weren't really looking at what political party somebody was in. You're like, is this a
No.
person you want to work with or not? Now things are tend to be a little bit more divided. Would you advise them to be like, man, put that out of your head. You can learn stuff from people no matter what little initials by their name.
Yeah, I mean, 100% because, you go back, I think we're around the same age. I was in college in the late 80s, early 90s, right? And
Yep.
Reagan was still president when I got into college. And so there was a huge divide at that time between, not like today, not quite as contentious, but I was coming back to Maryland and Anne Arundel County where nobody was registered Republican. Everybody
Right.
was a Democrat, including my dad, who was, because the Democrats supported the Greeks more back then. And so it just was all in who you uh, aligned with and who you felt close to. But I never told anybody my party affiliation,
Yeah.
going into that kind of stuff because it didn't matter. It's who do you like?
Right.
Who has creative ideas? Most importantly, who's willing to listen, right? That's
And
the thing that I'm always drawn to.
yeah.
Who will
And that's
listen?
and that still should be everyone's
Yeah.
guiding principle. But it has changed to the opposite way that if you like the wrong person, you're dead. Right? You have
Yeah.
no, it's over.
But
But
isn't that more that's not so much for the people who are actually doing business with the government, right? Like,
Well,
as
and
can
much
be
I
as
actually didn't even mean doing business with the government.
uh-huh,
It really
yeah,
was just around getting around people.
being part of your
uh-huh.
So
community. Yeah.
I would go to the, Lincoln dinner that the Republicans put on. I would go to the Democrats', crab feast down in South County. I just wanted to be around the people that were making decisions around here. I would go to the bankers' conferences because you learn how they operate. How do they make decisions on who gets a loan? I joined the board of Associated Builders and Contractors even though I was a civil engineer, I wasn't building anything, but those were the guys that were my customers, my clients. I learned so much from I joined the legislative committee of ABC. I found out that they struggled with the challenge between union labor and non-union labor and what were the pros and cons of that. It just, if you allow yourself to be a sponge and you put yourself around people with differing opinions, but listen to why they have those differing opinions, man, you learn a ton and it gives you a lot of perspective.
So
Man,
you're
that is
when
a
you're
perfect
young,
way that's perfect.
yeah,
That sums up everything, I think. And it's a good way to end it. Ermis,
when
oh
you're
boy.
young, you meet everybody. It sounds like there was a lot of free food, and Ermis
Yeah.
has still stayed in shape, so he's doing something.
He
He must be
is.
listening to house calls and still exercising because he
Yeah.
always looks great.
He does. He does.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to, despite despite the fact that I drink wine and do those things, I try to balance it with a little bit of exercise and watching what I eat. So
It
Good.
works. It works. No. Ermis, you're the man.
That
Thank
was
you
a
for doing this, buddy.
great
Uh,
message.
oh
that
yeah,
was a great message.
this was awesome, guys. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Sure.